I would like to welcome you all to this SAFETY4SEA Talk on developing a robust safety culture within maritime. In this talk, we would like to discuss about the hot topic of safety culture, as defined, a set of values, attitudes, practices that management and staff share. In order to have an effective safety culture, you need to have commitment from the top, as ISM states. And in these changing times, safety continues to be a top priority for shipping. And we need to become, let's say, more safety conscious now more than ever. We would like to discuss in this talk with esteemed panelists, how has the safety culture evolved over the last, let's say, 20 years within the century? Is the pandemic an opportunity or a threat to safety at sea? How can we become more safety conscious? And let's say discuss on best practices and lessons to be learned from within the industry and from other industries as well. Now, without any further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists. We have in this talk joining us Captain Pradeep Chawla. Captain Pradeep is the Managing Director of QHSE and training for one of the largest, if not the largest, ship management in the world, Anglo-Eastern Ship Management. We have Dr. Claire Pecan. Dr. Claire is Director of Safe Marine. We have Captain Rahul Sapra. Captain Rahul is the loss prevention manager based in Singapore with Standard Club. And last but not least, we have Eric Green, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the well-known Green Jacobsen. I would like to welcome you all in this talk. And I would like to start right away with the first question we would like to discuss. I would like to ask each one of you, what does safety culture mean to you or to your organization? And I would like to ask your views of what do you think, is it uniquely defined, let's say, across the industry? Let's start with Captain Pradeep.
Thank you and good evening. Safety culture, it's pretty much like the live stream of my job all through the day. So my definition is a very simple one. I think safety culture, I mean, I know in reality, there is no standardized definition in our industry at the moment. The QHSE one is the most popular one, but it's a mouthful of words. So my definition for it is a very simple one, that when every employee in the company believes in safety and thinks about safety in every decision that they take, and that applies from the chairman down to the ordinary seaman or trainee seaman on board taking the action. And a way to measure it would be to say that, what do people do when they are not being watched? How do people work when nobody is watching them? And it's somewhat, if you want an analogy about it, is that if there are no speed cameras on the highway, would you drive without speeding up? Would you follow every rule even if it costs more money or if it costs more time, would you still follow things in a safe manner? And if you've achieved that in your organization, you have a good safety culture. That would be my definition.
Okay. And how about the second part of the question? Sorry, we'll roll this out later on. Claire, your thoughts?
Thank you. For me, it's the culture of an organization is something that exists sort of outside of its membership. So it is perpetuated, even though people in the organization may change, the safety culture persists. And so to me, it's like a learned set of behaviors and approaches to the value of people's lives, the value of profit before people and things like that. So I think it's almost intangible, and it's driven by people's beliefs about what's important and about whether accidents can be prevented or not. I think it's reflected in the practices and the rituals that an organization might have. So example, whether they hold safety committee meetings, but what happens at those safety committee meetings. And I think it's driven largely to my mind, by the senior members of the organisation and their values. What do they value in their business? Do they value people, or do they value profit? Putting it in simple terms. And I think it's separate from safety behaviour. I think safety behaviour, so what people actually do, whether they wear their PPE, whether they follow procedure, is a reflection of the safety culture of the organisation, but is subtly separate from it. So that's my take on it. I think we need to differentiate between what's visible and what's not visible, and sort of the probably unwritten and unsaid beliefs about an organisation, and what we can see is the safety behaviour as an outcome of that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this visible versus the non-visible parts of the culture of the organisation. That's very interesting. Captain Raul, your thoughts?
Hi, Apostolos. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on this webinar today. I think, like both Pradeep and Claire mentioned, I think there are, it's the culture, it's the way that a company operates. But I think for me, from a seafarer's perspective, I think it is preparing yourself. It is preparing yourself for the worst case scenario. And when you do that, right from being, whether you're the MD of a company, right from being whether you are a naval architect who's designing the ship, or somebody in the shipyard who's constructing the ship, or a chief mate or a master who's operating the ship, or an AV who's just doing his normal day-to-day mooring operation or steering. When you have that conscious and your diligent approach, that whatever I have to do with the worst case scenario in my mind, and then I take each and every step that I take in doing an operation or completing a task, I do it with that mentality, that I am prepared for the worst case situation. I am prepared to deal with an emergency. I am prepared in providing my people the right education and training to complete their job in a proper manner, to have a fair reporting system, to have a system where it's not about blaming anyone but trying to learn. Because as human beings, I think we all have a lot of limitations, but we all have a lot of capabilities. And I think it's harnessing those capabilities to move from a situation where we have one-man error to having a team which is kind of watching each other's back and ensuring that we don't end up in a soup. I think that's what safety culture to me is. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric, your thoughts?
Yes, thank you, and hello everyone. My thoughts are very much linked to a definition made by a guy called Edgar Schein, and I always like to refer to that because it provides clarity to me. And what Edgar Schein is saying is culture is like an onion. There's stuff you can see and there's stuff you can't see before you start peeling the onion. And what he typically says is that the first layer, when you stand with the onion, then there's some visible evidence of a culture. So when you go on board a vessel, you will find visible evidence of a safety culture. You have life rafts, you have signs, you have fire extinguishers, you see people conducting meetings, etc. So the first layer of a culture, safety culture, is what I would call visible evidence. You can see it. The second layer, when you start peeling it, and that's sometimes where you start crying when you're peeling an onion if you're in the wrong culture. But nevertheless, what he's saying is the second layer is what he calls expressed values. And so this is what we say. And seen in the safety culture perspective, that is you talk about your procedures, your checklists, your policies. That is something you talk about and say, this is how we would like things done around here. But I think what is quite clear is that there's often a big difference between talk and walk. So the core of a culture is actually what is called fundamental beliefs, in accordance with Schein, where he says, when you peel off the last layer, when you get behind the words and you start observing what actually goes on and listening to Raoul and Claire and Pradeep, you could say, what is actually happening at the end of the day? What is it that we really believe in? What are the actions we show? And how is that then reflected in everyday life? That's what he calls the fundamental beliefs. Or, and you distinguish between culture and behavior, Claire, but I would say at the fundamental belief, you would also see how people actually do their business around here. And I think if you look at it from a safety perspective, well, the fundamental belief among your crew on board a vessel in a company, for instance, if you could get the inner feeling in a culture, just like the safety belt, that when you enter your car, you know something is wrong when you don't have your safety belt on. If you can get the same feeling on board a vessel, when people have forgotten to do a toolbox talk, a debriefing, they say, stop, something is wrong. There's something, we cannot work before we've actually done our toolbox talk or we've done our debriefing, because we know this is the way to do things around here. If you can get in there and get that anchored in your culture as an example, then it becomes a fundamental belief. So one thing is that you talk about it, say, here we do toolbox talks or debriefs. Another thing is to actually see that people inside of them feel, whoops, there's something wrong. I will then stop myself and do that. That's how I like to see it. And just listening to you guys, there are many ways of describing it, but I think we all agree it is connected somehow to behavior and the fundamental beliefs of how we see how things should be done.
Okay, thank you very much, Eric. Now, I would like to, let's say, go into a little bit further. I would like to ask, how has the safety culture evolved over the last 20 years? And I would like to ask you to identify any sort of drivers and barriers within this evolution. Captain Pradeep.
In a simple statement, I would say over the past 20, 30 years, we've certainly, everything about safety in our industry has improved significantly. And there have been many drivers for it, but I would say that the most fundamental drivers have been the commitment of the people on board, driven by both regulatory changes and by a more fundamental belief that they do need to improve. So the regulatory framework which has helped is the International Safety Management Code from 1998. In fact, before that, there was this International Ship Managers Association had a code which used to be audited by 3 classification societies, which was a pretty good code. And after that, it's also been OCIMF, and with the SIRE inspections on tankers, that has helped to drive safety. And similarly, the bulk carrier industry and the container industry now is moving forward further and further into somewhat similar standards like the tanker industry. We all know that ISM came around with the Herald of Free Enterprise as one of the incidents. And so those have been the framework which has helped. Society in general has become more aware of preventive measures in accident prevention, and that has helped the shipping community too to learn from the way things are going. Environmental improvements have certainly been driven more by society than by regulatory framework in the past. It just became unacceptable to the world to have hundreds of tons of oil in the water, and that was driven far before the regulatory framework actually caught up with it. There have been certain barriers, yes, over it. And one of the things in our industry which is very different is we are the first globalized industry in the world, genuine globalized industry, and still is. So that kind of relates then to being a fragmented industry, because there are, it's unlike the airline industry where there are like a handful of manufacturers of aeroplanes. And that globalization is a benefit, but at the same time, it is a barrier to improvements because things have to be agreed in across the world in IMO and 150 countries before things get actually done. And I mean, the globalized nature also means that people are still not even agreeing about how to send a crew list to the shore authorities. A simple thing like that is not agreed in our industry. The second barrier, I think, has been the pattern of handling the human resources. There is a tendency, because of the globalization, of treating the human workforce as contracted labor, to put it crudely, uh, and having this constant urge to look for the cheapest nationality available. I mean, everybody from the business world knows that to have in any industry, that in order to create a stable, sustainable company, you need to have a wonderful workforce. You need to reward people, you need to keep your best people, etc., etc. But in our industry, because of this fragmented nature of the industry, we've had a slower growth with that thinking. I mean, I can talk about my company. When I joined this company in 1985, we were 12 ships, and we operate 658 ships of today with another 200 ships with crew. And one of the philosophies that has worked for us is to have a stable workforce and start with recruitment of cadets, train our own cadets, and try our best not to let the competition steal away our good people. And that has helped for us. So that's one of the barriers that I would say has affected us. Uh, I think also the change in society is helping now in further improvements in safety, because the millennials don't think exactly the same way as the past of accepting things in status quo. They are challenging the norms of the past, and that is helping in making further improvements, because you need to be in touch with what are the beliefs of your workforce also. That's another long topic about millennials, but it's certainly one of the things to consider going forward in the way safety culture evolves in our industry. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Pradeep. Claire, your thoughts?
Well, in terms of how I see things have developed or are developing, I think there's far more awareness that safety culture and safety behavior is more than simple competence assurance. I think in the past, I mean, it is still prevalent today, but less so, is this thinking that as long as people have their certificate of competence, they should behave safely and they should be able to do their job. And there wasn't really much understanding of how the environment and the peers support or otherwise somebody's performance, because that's what we're talking about really at the end of the day. But I think there's a growing understanding, as Pradeep says, that those working on board are people. They are unique individuals, each with their own, strengths and challenges, and the industry needs to treat them as people, and thereby, improve their performance, and that will improve the safety culture. I think also we are moving away from what I call an engineering approach to safety management, which is largely reflected in the ISM code. And what I mean by that is it's all about document control. And this, to my way of thinking, stems out of the quality assurance sort of practices of other industries. And it's all about procedures and documenting things and filling in checklists. And I think this journey, I think, is only just beginning. I think there's a move away from trying to proceduralize everything to an understanding about safety leadership and how important it is to have the right values at the top driving the performance and the behaviors of people within the organization. Your questions about what's driving any evolving developments. Well, I agree completely with Pradeep. And I would add that I think research, and that's probably harking back to my previous life as a professor, I think research has increased knowledge. I think the research that has been done in the industry has grown in scale. The industry was notorious for not investing in research, but I think that's changing. Certainly companies are investing in trying to analyze and understand what's going on within their own organization. And I think clients, like Pradeep says, I think clients are demanding better standards. And so, sometimes those demands have negative consequences because they're too prescriptive and they don't allow the company to develop their own response to their demands. But I think that's another driver of improvements. In terms of the barriers, well, I think there's too much chasing the money. I think the focus on profit, and it may, and I understand that it's a challenging world out there. Freight rates are still low in many sectors of the industry, but I think this pursuit of money, whether it's acquiring more ships to come under your management or driving a better deal, or keeping wages low, I think this pursuit of profit, rather than doing it because of the love of the industry and what you want to offer your customers, I think is a barrier to making the sorts of improvements that we need around crew welfare and safety culture. And I think despite MLC, there still is an uneven playing field, and we still have the rogue operator able to compete and undercut the quality operators. So I think as long as that is the case, then it's going to be very hard for companies to invest in safety improvements, when the margins are so low. So that's my thoughts.
Okay, I have one let's say reservation on the last bit you touched with investments on safety, because I'm not saying I'm disagree. I'm just saying we have seen the leaders of the industry investing heavily, I would say, in improving the safety culture. I'm not disagreeing to what you said. I'm just expressing a reservation, because I think there is a correlation between safety investment and sustainability of the company and so on and so forth. But that was not the topic. You touched upon a sensitive issue over there. Raul, your thoughts?
Hi, thanks, Apostolos. So in my opinion, I think one of the biggest drivers, obviously, pushing safety. I wouldn't say safety culture as such, but safety, I think, is the ISM code. And I think and if you look at, the number of incidents over the years, we can see that ever since, the ISM came out in the late 90s, there has been a steady decrease in the number of, maritime incidents that we see. I think other factors which have been driving it is obviously technology and awareness, like Claire and Pradeep mentioned. So I think these are the major drivers. And now that you have internet, and suddenly if you have, one small incident somewhere in the world, it's all over the news. And when the media and the public sees it, it really affects the reputation of a company. And if the company wants to maintain their good image, clean image, then they need to ensure that, they have fewer incidents or no incidents. And especially no big incidents where, you have incidents where you have casualties or you have damage to the environment. So I think those are the biggest drivers from my perspective in the last, let's say, 2 decades, which have been driving safety. And I think the biggest barriers, I think, is like Pradeep mentioned, that we are a global industry, but still very fragmented. So I think there is a big gap between the maritime sector in certain parts of the world when compared to, other parts where, obviously some of the nations are not as rich as the other nations, so they're not able to invest as much in safety. And also we have to understand that because of this fragmented nature, it is also the nature of the people who are joining ships. So imagine somebody coming from, countries, poor countries, and joining a ship. His perception of safety is very, very different from a person who's coming from a developed country. His perception of safety is very different. So to train this person who's coming from a third world country, going to work on a ship, and to change his perception about safety is a huge task. And I think that is a big barrier that we have. And with the way in which technology is moving, very fast, there is this gap between what we want to achieve and how we are going to achieve it. And I think that gap needs to be made narrower. We have to invest not just money and resources, but also training, also mentoring, also, I think, welfare, respect. I think these are some of the things that we have to kind of put in a collaborative manner from various industry sources and stakeholders, and to drive safety. I think these are the barriers which we are facing, in my opinion, right now. And I think if we can make this gap narrower, if we can change the perception about safety, then we can move forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Rahul. Eric?
But I think it's a really, really interesting talk, and listening to all of you, I think it's really, really interesting about drivers, barriers, and what's happening. I think I agree in principle with all of you. It's really a question on how do you nail it? What is the conclusion here? Now, just talking about drivers, I think I agree with all you. A lot of things, positive things, have happened over the last 20 years, for sure. However, when talking about what drives it, I can refer to the many safety maturity assessments we do here at Green Jacobsen, because, I mean, over the last 4 years, we've spoken with 1,800 seafarers and 400 office staff, and each interview lasts between 1 and 1.5 hours. So we have nearly 3,000 hours of interviews. And when we ask the question, so when initiatives are launched or taken in your company, what happened? What motivated this change, seen from a safety perspective? And the predominant answer is still if we had an incident or if the client required it. So you could say what drives it is still very much a reactive response to what happens of incidents or what the client wants. And you can say that really also shows the barrier, because if we were driven by a proactive approach to say we have a culture, coming back to what we spoke about before, a safety culture, we have a safety culture where we continuously trying to work on to learn before an incident rather than after an incident. That's what we're trying to achieve. Now, I'm not saying that everyone in the industry doesn't try to do that, but when we listen to what people are saying, the predominant answer is when we change, when we try to improve, two motivators are behind: an incident or a client. I think, however, though, when that is said, and I'd like to echo what you said, Claire, I think definitely there's a movement from this engineering procedural quality control approach to a more, you could say, human-driven approach. And the best way I can describe it is that really all of us here, or even companies, we could sit in a room for 3 months and we could produce the best mooring procedure one could ever imagine. And that's really what many companies have been focusing on. We could sit and we could describe, we can discuss, etc. But at the end of the day, as soon as the vessel starts entering into a port and the mooring has to happen, there's someone in the forecastle, and maybe it's raining. Maybe 2 of them are wearing glasses. Maybe they're tired. Maybe they can't see anything because there's a light in their eyes from the terminal. Maybe they've had an argument. Maybe someone has been having a fight with his wife at home on Zoom just before they entered into this operation. So at the end of the day, we can describe and we can draw maps about our safety performance, how we would like things done. But at the end of the day, it's directed and decided by those who perform the job at that given moment. And coming back to the discussion about culture, what is the culture then? What is legal? What do we legalize of behavior and actions in that moment when someone is doing a specific job? And I think there's definitely a movement from this engineering approach to acceptance of we need to legalize, we need to develop behaviors, understandings, perceptions, etc., which really says stop, or stop and think, or talk more, or share opinions more. So we are moving more and more towards that, and I can only echo that. When it comes to barriers, I think that one of the biggest barriers we're seeing is actually the organizational approach to developing safety culture. There's still this very, if we have a training course, if we have a competence management system, if we have done this and we have done that, then we're going to be safer. The thing is, seeing from an organizational perspective, it's never connected. So you can do a course, you can also have competence development or an appraisal process, but if it's all disconnected, you're going to be all over the place and running different directions. So seen from an organizational perspective, you need to align the possibilities you have to impact people, not just saying, now they've been on this course, let's see what happens. Now, I could go on for a long time, and I know you were kindly asked us to be short here, and I've already exceeded my time here. So I will rest my case.
Okay. Now, I would like to ask again, if there are any, let's say, lessons to be learned or best practices from the past from other industries. It could be any sort of other industries, any safety-intensive industry, or maybe within our sector as well. What do you think, Captain Pradeep?
Well, I think one of the problems of our industry is that we are quite insular and not willing to learn quickly from the mistakes of the other industry. I think for going forward into the future, there are certain things that our industry needs to accept very quickly. And one is that the acceptance by society for accidents and pollution and in the marine industry will be much lesser going forward. And they should relate, we all should relate it to the demise of many companies and industries that have not listened to their customers and not listened to the society with respect to their industry needing change. Another area where I think it would be very important would be to adopt technology or perish. If we all remember that we used to have a different kind of a phone in Japan a few years ago with the CDMI technology versus GSM. We had to change phones in Japan. It's the same with the taxi industry. Uber came and changed everything. So a disruptor comes in and changes the way an industry is working. So these are all kind of technology driven solutions that have found their way into other industries and taken away the model that was existing in that particular industry. And the industry would also need to learn that while we all compete for the business, there is a value in sticking together as an industry to agree on common standards. Again, going back to the telephone example. So today in IMO, we are very quickly agreeing on some very significant improvements to protect the planet. And that's a good example of the way the marine industry is trying to move forward, listening to the society that we want a better planet, and we are acting upon it. If we slow down the changes, I'm sure there would be other ways of doing shipping the way we are doing it now. And maybe the ship owner charter model would change, and maybe we would then have logistics companies taking over and becoming ship owners of the kinds of Amazon who might say, well, this industry is not improving in the way things are. The society will not accept that, and we will bring in a different standard, a different way of looking at things. Every industry needs to be aware in the technology moving so quickly that the adoption of new things has to be quick, and we need to be aware of where the society is, what is the society demanding, and listen to that. That would be my thing, that this industry needs to be moving quickly into adopting technology and improving now for the future.
Okay, thank you. Claire, your thoughts on lessons to be learned and best practices?
Yeah, well, I think my key one is that it's going back to this idea of engineering control through documentation control. And I think one of the lessons we're learning is that procedures offer an illusion of control. And certainly you can't proceduralize for every eventuality. And it's far better to empower those on the front line to meet the challenges that they face. Whether that is training, I see the procedures and the checklists have their place, but I think one of the lessons is they have their limitations as well, and that it's about the people. And I think that's something that we can take from other industries, is they've moving away from blaming the human, in terms of human error, and looking at how their systems set people up to fail. And I think that's certainly one of the ways that we can move forward. And in part, it's our approach to accident investigation. And I think that's another thing we can learn from our often comparator is the aviation industry, but they are moving now to look at doing human factors investigations of accidents rather than the manner in which we do it at the moment, which is largely to apportion blame. And what I mean by that is trying to understand, for companies when they do have an incident or an adverse event, is to try and understand the perspective of the individuals in the moment. What was guiding their thinking, because they never predicted the accident was going to come. And I think taking a human factors approach and understanding it from the perspective of the actor, the seafarer at the time, would help improve our approaches. And coming back to the elements of culture, having an open reporting culture. You're never going to learn what's happening on board your ships unless you have an open culture where people do not fear to report things. And I think a learning culture, and what I mean by that is management's courage and commitment to make the changes that they need to make. And these can be quite significant. It might be turning down a contract because of the contract terms are just too onerous for the seafarers, so it may take some sort of tough decisions. And I think coming back to what Pradeep was saying, and treating your seafarers with respect, and trusting them and providing them with the tools to do their job rather than blaming them for when things go wrong.
Okay, thank you. Captain Rahul, reviews?
Hi. Yeah, I think it is a bit unfair to be comparing the maritime industry to any other industry or to the aviation sector, because there is a big difference. I think maritime industry is unique in itself. Like Pradeep said, it's a global industry. There are multiple players, and and it is also fragmented with huge gaps between how ships are operated from one region to another. So I think it is not fair to compare it to the aviation sector. I think obviously maritime industry has to embrace technology if they have to grow the way the world is growing, and there are obviously a lot of challenges there. We are talking about, decarbonization, and we're talking about artificial intelligence or autonomous shipping, and all these things are very, very valid. But I think that shipping is a unique industry. It has its unique challenges. No other industry, you have people living on the ship for 6 months, 8 months. You call it your home. You call it your fellow crew members as your family. So it is a very, very different and a very challenging environment. And I think what is required is that the world should recognize how important shipping is and how important seafarers are. And they should then work towards a system whereby not only is the industry then embraced by the society, but also that these gaps, like I mentioned earlier, are narrowed. We have to invest more in training, but that training should not be the minimum standards, right? So because when we talk about shipping, we talk about STCW standards, but those are somewhat like minimum standards. We talk about manning a ship, we talk about minimum manning. So I think we have to get out of that mentality, and we have to look at a scenario where we will man our ships with as many people as we feel fit for that particular operation. If a tanker is doing, a VLCC is doing maybe one port in 40 days or something, okay, we can have maybe slightly fewer crew on it. But if we are having, let's say, a ship which is doing 3 ports in a week, then obviously we need more people. The other factor which I think that we need to look at is that whenever we have a new regulation or a new requirement, so be it safety, be it security, be it now it's COVID-19, or be it decarbonization, or be it IMO 2020 new sulfur requirements, everything is put on the seafarer. And if you look at what is his competency, what did he study when he wanted to become a seafarer, it is very limited. And suddenly you thrust him with so many responsibilities, and on top of that you have to realize that every regulation talks about 8 hours of lookout a day, or a gangway watch for a seafarer probably 12 hours a day. So you want those continuous operations going on in the background, but at the same time you are expecting the seafarer or the master to also do plant maintenance, to also do your QHSE reporting, to also do victualling, to also do accounting, to also do the security. Now there are a designated COVID officer also on some of the ships. So you cannot expect one man to be a superman. I think we need to realize that, and we need to have people who are specialized and who are able to then work on the ships, but also carry out these different functions. It is an industry by itself. Each ship, I think, is an industry, is a home, is a hotel, and we have to get different, I would say, these environments into that same ship, and we have to cope with all these environments. So you need to have people for these specific requirements who can then go and do their job in a good, safe manner.
Okay, thank you. Eric?
Thank you. It's really inspiring listening to you guys. And as I said before, it's always good to be the last one, because then you have so much inspiration to take from these talks. I think my starting point is always, when you talk about these things, every single situation is unique. Every single time you have an operation where you have humans involved, it's a unique situation where they have to have a unique way of dealing with it. The way I often talk about it is that what we have versus what we need. We have a lot of resources. We can invest in technology. We have competencies. We have common standards. I think the usage of technology we need to exploit, and we need to figure out if we can do that more. We have a lot of things, a lot of resources that can support our performance. But every single time we enter into any kind of operation on board a vessel, there's a discussion on, do we have everything we need in order to manage that? And just echoing what you said before, Claire, when you're talking about, for instance, an incident, we're talking about what was guiding their thinking then at that moment. And I think rather than looking at humans and seafarers as something which consists of error, we need to actually look at them as a resource which we can use more of, or we can develop further, because everything, as you said, Raul, everything is put on the seafarer. So we need to sort of help them to develop what they need in the given situations. That could be to help them to direct their attention in certain directions to do that. What I'm trying to say here is, back to my starting point, yes, we can learn from other industries and we should do so. But I think at the end of the day, it's all about what we need in our industry, because it is unique, as you said, Captain Raul. And it's all about accepting and working with the seafarers on their ability to direct their attention in the right direction, because they're not stupid, but sometimes they get misled. And as you said, the illusion of procedures, this industry is full of illusions that when we have our experience, when we've ticked off the boxes, when we've put them into a matrix, when we have put them on training courses, then everything is okay. But this is only what we have. What we need to look at is, do we have everything we need to manage this unique situation? And every single time on board a vessel, there's a human involved. So how do we help these humans actually direct their attention towards the right thing and use each other in the best possible manner? So I think it requires a human approach in a higher degree than more of the same, in other words, procedures, checklists, and what have you.
Okay, thank you. Now, as we move forward, I would like to, let's say, change a little bit on our focus here. As we see that technology is being integrated on board ships, I would like to ask, what are the biggest challenges and opportunities with respect to safety culture across the industry as we move forward? So within the next, let's say, 5 years, what do you think are the biggest challenges and the biggest opportunities with respect to safety as we see the technology being integrated? Captain Pradeep.
Well, the adoption of technology has certainly become faster now, but the challenger that is going to be there is trying to make sense of the huge amounts of data that we are bringing ashore now. I think the previous decade was all about trying to get information. And with the technology improvements now, the issue is not about getting the information, it's about analyzing it and getting insights into the human behavior. And I see a lot of dangers in that part, because technology tends to generalize things across by algorithms. And I am most worried about adoption of technology and machine learning and artificial intelligence kind of stuff when it comes to trying to understand human behavior. I think experts like Eric and Claire, who've been doing this for their life jobs, will all agree that a human being changes in the way he or she behaves given what is happening in the ecosystem. And Eric mentioned a whole lot of things about whether someone has had an argument before and what's the ergonomic factors around them, the state of the mental mind at that time when you are doing the task. And so that's the danger I see, that if we were to adopt technology towards uh, improving safe behaviors, we need to be careful about what insights are we inferring from the data that is coming in. To give a practical example, all of us are now doing a whole lot of analysis with voyage data recorders. And there are technologies there about measuring the fatigue of an individual by watching the movement of the eyes. Things like that are being experimented now on the bridges. We are looking at how people are behaving by taking hard points of data and then trying to understand the human beings. That, I think, is an area where the research about prediction of human behavior with these kind of things is still very nascent in all across all industries. It's not only in shipping. The benefits that I would see about trying to improve safety culture with the use of technology is that by observing all these data points, we are at least focusing our mind further on trying to improve safety. So some of these technologies are going to be very successful in predicting it. So, I mean, like we all, the younger generation and all of us, I think, are obsessed with watching our number of steps and our heartbeats and whatever else. Yes, it also has some benefits about it because we are more aware of what we were not aware of after using this technology. So we probably did not know before that we were not sleeping well till we wore one of these gadgets. So technology certainly brings in advantages, a lot of advantages, and we should be open to utilizing that, but keeping in mind that the human mind is a complex organ. And we all know that the genome project that is happening in US with which was started with Barack Obama with a $30 billion investment, it's still struggling to understand the human mind. I think the medical science is probably handled a lot of things when it comes to repairing limbs and, you know, replacing things with artificial tissue and burns, for example. But when it comes to understanding the human behavior, I think the medical science, neuroscience is still struggling to understand this complex nature of the human brain in terms of behaviors. The same individual who has, and one of the evidences of that when we talk about safety culture is, why do we have the world's biggest maritime industry accidents with the senior most well-trained seafarers? If you go with the top of my head, the Exxon Valdez Master was a very senior one. So was the Torrey Canyon one. So was the Emoco Cadiz one. So was the Brer one. So was the Prestige one. And they all knew their job well. They had proved it over 15, 20 years in command. And one fine day, their own contribution or a number of contributory factors came together, the standard Swiss cheese model and stuff like that. It came around to creating a disaster. So what goes on in the mind of an individual is still very difficult to predict with technology. And when it comes to operational efficiency, I think technology is going to give us a lot more new and better results about engine performance and fuel efficiency and all that. But when it comes to safety culture and human mind, I mean, I have an open offer with all my friends in the psychology world and safety world. Let's sit together and try and find whatever we have on predictive safety analysis research around the world. And let's put our heads together to see what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. I am totally a fan of technology to improve things, but I'm also, I would say, older and wiser to know that every new gadget doesn't always give you the best output, till the gadget gets proven. So that would be my take on adoption of technology with respect to safety culture and human behavior.
Okay. Claire, your thoughts?
Thank you. It's very interesting listening to Pradeep. For me, it's about the implementation. Technology isn't of itself good or bad. It's how it's implemented and what you desire from it. And I think one thing that the internet has facilitated and is the communication with ships, whereas before they'd sail off into the sunset and they were largely masters of their own control. It has facilitated, as Pradeep said, huge amounts of data coming from the ship to the office. And I think with technology, I think the adage, you be careful what you wish for. So I think what technology has enabled is micromanagement of the ship. And I think, again, I'll come back to this point, it's how you implement it. We've already seen the fallout of ECDIS, you know, and it's the way it was implemented, you know, it was adopted before it was proven. And same with ballast water treatment plants, you know, the technology has, and the developers are driving the show, and I think we need to be careful. I think, yeah, we need to value our humans more and use technology to empower them, as Pradeep's, you know, eloquently described. The human mind is infinitely more capable than even the most sophisticated algorithm, even to this day. So I think we really need to use technology to empower people and support them, rather than, I think, has been, you know, with the idea of autonomous ships or unmanned ships, is to replace the human. And I don't think we can do it. And I think we need to recognize that we cannot replace the human, and that we need to be looking at how we support them rather than replace them. And I think, you know, it comes back to what are the values driving the adoption of new technology? You know, is it cost savings or is it improvement of performance? And I think the strategy that an organization adopts will be dependent on the values driving their behavior.
Okay. Captain Raul?
So just before our session today, I was reading an article earlier today about Nokia and Apple being around the same level around 2007, 2008. And in the next 12 years, you know, where Nokia is and we know where Apple is today. So I think both these are, you know, technology companies. It's not like I'm comparing, you know, two companies from different sectors. Both of them are technology companies, but I think Apple evolved. And where it evolved was it knew what the customer wants. And I think shipping also will have to evolve depending on what the customers need. And I think obviously digitalization technology is something I totally echo what Claire and Captain Chawla mentioned, that it is there as an aid, it is there to facilitate, but at the end of the day, it would be the seafarer who would be there operating the ships, at least in the next 15, 20 years. I don't really see autonomous shipping coming in a big way and doing transoceanic voyages. It could be, you know, in certain parts, some small, voyages and stuff, but not really in a big way for commercial shipping to be going autonomous. I think there would be more technology, and obviously technology can be used today. You know, we're wearing Apple watches and checking our blood oxygen level. 5 years ago, nobody knew what blood oxygen level was. So obviously technology is there and it's going to be there. The maritime sector needs to evolve itself. But I think what is equally important is to attract talent. I think there is a shortage of seafarers. The COVID situation has not made things easy. What is apparent to me is that the maritime industry is absolutely essential for the world to survive, for the trade to continue. And what is also very apparent to me is that the society knows very little about the maritime sector. So we need to increase the awareness that the society has about the maritime sector. And also we need to recognize and respect the seafarers for the job that they do. And equally, we need to upskill our seafarers. We need to make sure that, you know, not only are they just in the technical skills, but also in their soft skills about teamwork, about communication, and it has to be a two-way communication. So a lot of times we see this hierarchy where people in the junior ranks it's very difficult for them to communicate back to people who are in senior ranks. So I think it has to be a two-way communication. We could have a situation where we might not have ranks anymore on ships, and it would be more about just everybody having a basic set of competencies, whether it is navigation, whether it is cargo work, whether it is engineering, and they perform those functions. And I think that could be the future. And I think I'd like to stop here. Thanks.
Okay. Eric, your thoughts on the technology impact?
Yes, I agree with everything you said. It's really interesting. I think if technology is the solution, what was the problem? I believe in technology like everyone else does, but it doesn't necessarily, you can't say it's 100% good and you can't say it's 100% bad, just like you said, Claire, because every time you have technology and you have humans in and around it, using it, you have human interpretation. You have humans who need to use information and actually apply that and use that in reality in and around them. So as you said also, Claire, empower and support in that process. And I think also listening to what you said, Pradeep, but also Captain Raoul here, at the end of the day, we have technology, and at the end of the day, we need to have people who can make the right interpretations and use the relevant information at the given situation they are in at that moment. And sometimes the technology and the information it provides can actually cause confusion if you have not been supported in understanding that. Again, we come back to the focus on humans, the seafarer, because as you said before, Captain Raoul, everything is put on the seafarer at the end of the day. So I think technology can support performance, but humans decide in direct performance in their usage of it. A few words about interpretation and using of information. I think we're talking algorithms today, we're talking artificial intelligence, etc. But also, as you said, Claire, there's something called heuristics, and heuristics is the human's ability to make interpretations. And a lot of research has been made in this area that humans are actually super capable of making the right decisions and interpretations without the usage of technology in many situations. So we got to be careful that every single time we get technology on board, we believe we are then going to be safer. That's not necessarily the fact, because research can tell us something else. And again, coming back to what I said before, every single time we enter into some kind of operation on board a vessel, the situation is unique. It's never completely the same as what it was before. We therefore rely on humans every single time. And the only thing you can say about the future or what is to come is that you can't say anything for sure. It always has some kind of unpredictability, despite the fact you might have excellent technology behind. So at the end of the day, it's all about people, again, being capable of using this in the best possible way.
And I'd like to thank you. Your views, you're both inspirational and thought-provoking. I'm afraid we have to, let's say, conclude the panel. I would like to roll out our, let's say, final question. I would like to give you, let's say, 30 to 40 seconds. I would like to ask a quick one. I would like to ask you if you would change one thing that would either have a profound, let's say, or immediate impact in order to boost safety culture across the industry. So if you would like to change, let's say, one thing that would have either immediate or a profound impact to boost safety culture within the industry, what would it be, that thing, and why? Let's say I'll give you 30 seconds to sum up your thoughts Captain Pradeep.
Okay, I would like to try and take it up at the maximum macro level that I can think of, which changes the entire industry. If we look at the number of accidents around in the industry, majority of them are in the ship-port interface. So the one thing that I would like to see happening is that the power of IMO to dictate regulatory framework should extend into the ship-port interface, which is presently the ports are controlled by the local regulations and the ships are controlled by international regulations. And why do I say that? It's like, what would have the most significant impact? If we look at the number of incidents that happen in port versus out at sea, a simple measurement, it would say that we have pretty much controlled the number of accidents that are happening out at sea. And the minute we come in 25 miles into the coastal region, to the point of the berthing and back out to 25 miles out, that's where the maximum number of accidents are happening. So we need to do something with respect to looking at it in a macro view out there.
Okay. Claire.
For me, I think the COVID pandemic has taught us the importance of seafarers, but also their vulnerability. So the one thing that I would like to see, although I'm pretty much against prescription, is an ISM type code for health and well-being. I think until we get it on the statute books, I don't think we're going to see any vast improvements about the mental health and well-being of seafarers. And the reason I think that will be a profound change is because it would start to make seafarers recognizable as people. Securing their mental health and well-being will improve their performance, and it might even make seafaring as a career a more attractive proposition. So that would be my one choice.
Okay. Raul?
I think I also echo what Claire is saying. I think seafarers are the biggest investment today. I think we need to upskill them and we need to invest in them today. I think this pandemic has shown that they are very vulnerable. Just the other day, we saw the report about the Wakashio, where the captain said that, he was, or the chief officer said that he was trying to go close to the island because he wanted internet signal. So we have to realize that, these people are not living in conditions which we are quite used to today in the society ashore. And I think we need to give them their due. We need to give more respect to the seafarers. We need to narrow that gap in training that we have.
Okay. And Derek?
Agree with everyone. We need to, seafarers are humans, they're people, they have needs, they have thoughts, they have feelings, they are a resource. They are not something you look at as a number with a tick box telling this is how they are, therefore now you can use them for this and this and this. It's something you invest in. It's something you help them perform. You develop a culture where you legalize that humans can be heard, they can show their feelings, but also they can thrive. At the end of the day, all that will improve performance, because people who feel comfortable, safe, and respected, they will also work better. At the end of the day, I think that's what we need. And today, the industry looks at seafarers as bums on seat, a number, a certificate. Not everyone, but the general trend is that. And that is a sorry thing for humanity.
Okay, thank you all. I would like to thank you for your contribution. I would like to thank our viewers, and trust we see you in one of our future talks. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.